Hey guys, tonight we are stepping backwards through the misty shroud of time, leaving our pristine ceramic-tiled bathrooms and lemon-scented hand soaps behind to experience what hygiene was truly like in medieval times, along with a few other unexpected quirks of daily life from that era. Imagine walking into a wooden bedchamber where the air is a thick, swirling cocktail of wood smoke, roasted mutton, and a distinctly earthy human musk that everyone just accepted as the baseline smell of existence. It is a world where an evening routine did not involve a 10-step skincare regimen, but rather a damp linen cloth, a prayer against the plague, and a hope that the straw in your mattress did not bite back before dawn. Frankly, if you were dropped into a bustling 14th century market square right now with your modern triple-filtered nostrils, you probably wouldn't survive the initial olfactory shockwave, let alone the lack of running water. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I would also love for you to drop a comment below letting me know exactly where you are listening from tonight and what time it is on your clock. It is always deeply comforting to see our little community of night owls gathering from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a creaking wooden floorboard inside a modest room, the dim amber glow of a single tallow candle casting long, dancing shadows against the exposed timber walls. There is a large, circular wooden tub sitting in the center of the room, looking very much like a giant wine barrel that has been sliced in half. Steam rises from it in lazy, curling ribbons, carrying with it the sharp, clean aroma of dried chamomile, rose petals, and bay leaves floating on the surface of the water. This is the medieval bath, an event that is far more calculated, luxurious, and deliberate than popular history books would ever lead you to believe. For centuries, a rather persistent myth has circulated that people in the Middle Ages simply never washed, navigating their entire lives coated in a thick, permanent crust of dark, medieval grime. In reality, you watch as a servant finishes pouring the last bucket of heated water into the tub, a task that required dragging heavy iron cauldrons back and forth from an open hearth downstairs. It is an immense amount of physical labor just to get the water warm, which is precisely why people did not submerge themselves every single morning at the press of a button. You step closer to the tub, feeling the gentle warmth radiate against your skin, a soothing contrast to the cool, drafty air of the bedchamber. The popular historical consensus tells us that medieval people actually deeply valued cleanliness, but their approach was dictated by a completely different worldview than our own. They didn't know about bacteria or microscopic germs, but they cared immensely about decency, comfort, and presentation. To be clean was to be respectable, and to smell pleasant was a sign of a well-ordered soul. You notice a small, grayish block resting on a wooden stool next to the tub. This is a primitive form of soap, crafted painstakingly from wood ash and animal fat, scented lightly with lavender to mask the somewhat pungent odor of the lye. It doesn't foam up into a mountain of fluffy bubbles like the synthetic gels in your modern shower, but rather creates a slick, milky film that cuts through the oils on your skin with surprising efficiency. Historians still debate the exact frequency of these full-body submersions among the working classes, with some records suggesting it was a seasonal luxury, while others point to a weekly ritual before the Sabbath. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact from this period reveals that wealthy households actually possessed highly portable fabric-lined bathtubs, complete with padded canopy roofs to keep out drafts, allowing lords and ladies to essentially bathe inside a warm, private tent while traveling from castle to castle. They would sit in these cozy, insulated cocoons for hours, sipping spiced wine, while musicians played soft lutes just outside the heavy curtains. You submerge your hands into the water, watching the dried chamomile blossoms swirl around your fingers, realizing that this process was never about rushing to get ready for a corporate meeting. It was a slow, deliberate act of comfort. If a full bath wasn't available, the daily routine focused heavily on the parts of the body that were visible to the public: the face, the hands, and the feet. Every morning, you would use a basin of cold, fresh well water and a rough piece of linen cloth to vigorously scrub your skin until it flushed a bright, healthy pink. This friction rub was believed to draw out bad vapors from the flesh while removing the dust of the daily elements. It was a sensory experience that was remarkably grounding. The coarse texture of the flax fabric against your cheeks, the shocking wakefulness of the cool water, and the subsequent warmth that rushed to the surface of your skin. As you stand by the fading warmth of the wooden tub, you begin to realize that medieval hygiene was less about sterile elimination and more about a rhythmic harmony with the seasons and the available resources. The water in the tub begins to settle, becoming perfectly still, a dark mirror reflecting the gentle, rhythmic flickering of the candle on the wall. Your eyes grow a little heavier as you watch the steam slowly dissipate into the upper rafters of the room, carrying the last remnants of the herbal scent with it. The world outside is completely dark, hushed by the quiet gravity of a time before electricity, leaving only the soft ambient sounds of the night to fill the spaces between your thoughts. You take a long, deep breath, letting the heavy, ancient quiet settle into your bones, ready to follow the winding path of this old world just a little bit further into the shadows. The content is already in English. Here it is exactly as provided, with no additions, deletions, or explanations. You leave the quiet, dimly lit privacy of the bedchamber behind and step out into the crisp morning air, following a cobblestone path that winds toward the heart of a bustling medieval town. The morning fog is just beginning to lift, revealing the towering wooden beams and overhanging upper stories of the shops lining the narrow street. Soon, you find yourself standing before a heavy oak door from beneath which a thick, dense cloud of fragrant white steam escapes, curling lazily into the cool air. This is the local public bathhouse, or the stew, as it is commonly known in England, a vibrant and essential hub of urban medieval life. You push the door open and you are instantly enveloped by an immense, enveloping blanket of humid warmth that smells strongly of boiling bay leaves, cedarwood, and the sweet, yeasty aroma of fresh ale. Inside, the atmosphere is far from a quiet, clinical modern spa. It is a lively, communal sanctuary where the rigid social hierarchies of the medieval world temporarily dissolve in the steam. You see large, deep wooden vats scattered across the stone floor, each one filled with warm water and occupied by 3 or 4 people sitting shoulder to shoulder. Merchants, blacksmiths, clerks, and travelers sit together, their bare shoulders glistening in the moisture, engaged in low, murmuring conversations about market prices, royal taxes, and the latest town gossip. The popular historical consensus shows that public bathhouses were incredibly common throughout Europe until the late Middle Ages, offering an affordable way for ordinary townspeople to enjoy the luxury of a hot soak without the immense labor of heating water at home. You find a vacant wooden bench to sit on, leaning your back against the warm, moisture-slicked timber wall, letting the intense humidity immediately loosen the tension in your shoulders. It is a deeply sensory space, the rhythmic sloshing of water, the low hum of laughter echoing off the low-arched ceilings, and the gentle clinking of pewter mugs. In these bathhouses, cleanliness was inherently linked to leisure and hospitality. You could pay a few extra coins to have a meal served to you on a wooden board placed right across the top of your bathing tub. Imagine enjoying a plate of roasted pork and cold apples while submerged up to your chest in a warm lavender bath, gossiping with your neighbors about the local bishop's scandalous new shoes. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about these medieval stews is that they frequently operated as undercover bakeries. Because heating massive cauldrons of water required a tremendous amount of firewood, enterprising bathhouse owners would build their massive water heating furnaces directly beneath or adjacent to commercial bread ovens. This meant the exact same fire that boiled the water for your morning soak was also baking the loaves of sourdough rye that would feed the town later that afternoon, a brilliant display of medieval thermodynamic efficiency. Historians still debate the exact moment when these vibrant communal spaces began to fall out of favor with the public, as the arrival of severe epidemics in the late 15th century caused authorities to fear that warm water opened up the pores of the skin, making the body vulnerable to invisible miasmas floating in the air. But for now, in the heart of the 14th century, the bathhouse remains a place of profound relaxation and physical comfort. You watch a bathhouse attendant walk past, carrying a fresh bundle of dried rosemary and wild mint to toss into a newly filled tub, the crushed herbs releasing a sharp, invigorating burst of greenery into the humid air. The heat in the room begins to work its magic on you, making your eyelids feel heavy and your thoughts drift listlessly like the ribbons of steam rising toward the rafters. There is no urgency here. The world outside, with its muddy streets and hectic market stalls, feels miles away, locked on the other side of the thick oak door. You take a slow, deep breath of the moist, herbal air, feeling your entire body sink just a little deeper into the wooden bench, perfectly content to let the gentle, rhythmic sounds of splashing water wash over your mind as the morning slowly unfolds. You step away from the warm, steamy embrace of the public bathhouse, your skin still tingling slightly from the humid air, and find yourself sitting by a bright, sunlit window in a quiet corner of a local tavern. The morning light streams through small, diamond-shaped glass panes, illuminating tiny dust motes dancing lazily in the air. You look down at the wooden table in front of you, where a peculiar collection of items rests: a small, shallow ceramic bowl filled with a fine, grayish-green powder, a flask of clear white wine, and a piece of rough, unbleached linen fabric, carefully woven from coarse flax fibers. This is your toolkit for the morning's dental regime, an aspect of medieval hygiene that was surprisingly sophisticated, even if it lacks the minty, foaming convenience of a modern plastic tube. The popular historical consensus among modern folks is that medieval people walked around with mouths full of blackened, decaying stumps, enduring constant agonizing toothaches as a normal condition of life. In truth, when archaeologists examine skeletons from the 12th and 13th centuries, they often find teeth that are remarkably intact and free from the widespread cavities we see today. You pick up the small piece of linen cloth, wrapping it tightly around your index finger. Without the existence of refined white sugar, which wouldn't arrive in Europe in massive, tooth-destroying quantities for several centuries, the average medieval diet of coarse rye bread, seasonal vegetables, and lean meats kept plaque largely at bay. You dip your linen-covered finger into the flask of white wine, letting the cool, acidic liquid saturate the fabric, and then press it firmly into the ceramic bowl of powder. This particular mixture is an ancient recipe, blending finely crushed charcoal made from burnt rosemary twigs, pulverized cuttlefish bone, and a generous pinch of dried sage leaves. As you rub the wet, gritty paste against your front teeth, you feel the coarse texture of the linen working alongside the mild abrasive qualities of the charcoal. It tastes distinctly earthy, with a sharp, medicinal kick from the sage that immediately leaves your mouth feeling remarkably clean and refreshed. This manual scrubbing was designed to remove the film of the previous night's stew and to keep the gums firm and healthy. Historians still debate the exact effectiveness of some of the more exotic ingredients used in medieval dentistry, as text from the era sometimes recommended strange mixtures of honey, vinegar, and even pulverized cow hooves to strengthen loose teeth. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval oral care is that people often used the green, juicy twigs of the mastic tree or wild hazelnut bushes as primitive disposable toothbrushes. They would chew on the end of a fresh green twig until the wood fibers frayed out into a soft, bushy brush, which they would then use to meticulously pick away food particles between their teeth after a heavy meal. These twigs contained natural antimicrobial essential oils that naturally sanitized the mouth, meaning a medieval peasant sitting in a field chewing a stick might have had fresher breath than an 18th century aristocrat. You pick up a small carved piece of polished animal bone resting on the table. It is a medieval toothpick shaped like a tiny, elegant feather designed to be carried in a small leather pouch at your belt. Cleanliness of the mouth was considered a supreme social virtue. Entering a hall to speak with a lord while displaying food stuck between your teeth was viewed as an unforgivable insult and a sign of a lazy, chaotic mind. You rinse your mouth with a small sip of clean well water, spitting it out into a wooden bucket, feeling the lingering, cooling sensation of the sage and rosemary coating your throat. The simple, rhythmic motion of scrubbing your teeth, combined with the gentle, rhythmic ticking of a distant water clock in the tavern corner, creates a deeply calming atmosphere. The sun continues its slow, majestic arc across the sky, warming the wooden table before you. You lean your head back against the high wooden chair, letting your eyes close for just a brief moment, lulled by the familiar, comforting textures and scents of a morning routine that has remained unchanged for hundreds of years. You turn your attention from the quiet tavern window toward the back courtyard, where a massive wooden vat sits over a crackling stone hearth. The air out here is thick with a sharp, alkaline scent that smells like a mixture of wood smoke and a rainy day, the distinct aroma of medieval laundry. This is where the magic of clothing preservation happens, a task that required an immense amount of patience and physical strength. In the Middle Ages, you didn't just throw your clothes into a metal drum and walk away. Laundry was a rare, monumental event, often done only a few times a year for heavy outer garments, though undergarments were washed much more frequently. The popular historical consensus among modern people is that medieval clothing was universally filthy, caked in centuries of unwashed mud and sweat. In reality, because textiles were incredibly expensive, often taking months of spinning and weaving just to make a single tunic, people took meticulous care of their fabrics. You watch a laundress stir the bubbling vat with a long oaken paddle. Instead of modern chemical detergents, the primary cleaning agent here is lye, or white ash water. To make it, you would gather the clean white ash from a hardwood fire of oak or beech, place it in a wicker basket, and slowly pour hot well water over it. The liquid that dripped through the bottom was a powerful alkaline solution that could dissolve grease and sweat stains with astonishing power. You step over to a large wooden rinsing trough, watching the pale linen shirts swirl in the clear water. Remember the herbal bath mixture from earlier? Well, after the clothes were thoroughly cleaned with the harsh lye, they were rinsed in water infused with sweet woodruff, lavender, and crushed mint to give them a pleasant scent. For the absolute toughest stains, or to bleach linen to a brilliant snowy white, medieval laundry utilized a rather shocking secret ingredient: stale human urine. Because urine breaks down into ammonia, it was the premier bleaching agent of the ancient and medieval worlds. Historians still debate the exact social organization of these laundry gatherings, as some towns had dedicated professional guilds of washerwomen, while smaller villages relied on communal riversides where women would gather to beat clothes against flat stones. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval fabric care is that people often used a specialized laundry clay called fuller's earth. This natural, powdery clay was spread over greasy oil stains on expensive wool clothing. The clay would literally suck the grease right out of the fibers without the need to submerge the delicate, easily shrunk wool garment into hot water. You watch the laundress lift a heavy, wet linen smock from the rinsing trough, twisting it expertly to wring out the excess water before spreading it across a fragrant hedge of wild rosemary to dry in the afternoon sun. The combination of clean, sun-warmed fabric and the faint, sweet scent of herbs creates an incredibly comforting sensory experience. The rhythmic thwack-thwack of the wooden paddles against the wet cloth in the distance becomes a soothing, hypnotic background noise. As the afternoon heat peaks, the steam from the laundry vats slowly drifts upward, blending into the clear blue sky. You lean against a smooth wooden post in the courtyard, watching the white linens gently sway in the breeze like lazy summer clouds. Your body feels heavy, relaxed by the warmth of the sun and the steady, unhurried pace of the labor around you. There is a deep, ancient satisfaction in seeing chaotic grime transformed into clean, sweet-smelling order. And you let that peaceful feeling wrap around your mind as your thoughts begin to drift into a quiet, undisturbed stillness. You leave the warm, sun-drenched laundry courtyard and step back indoors, finding a quiet seat in a sunlit room where a specialized vanity kit sits arranged on a polished oak table. The afternoon light catches the smooth, translucent surface of an exquisitely carved horn comb, its teeth cut so fine they look like a rows of tiny, neat wooden needles. Next to it rests a small, dark glass vial stopped with a piece of beeswax, containing an amber-colored oil that smells intensely of rosemary, crushed cedar leaves, and sweet almond. This is the heart of medieval hair care, an intricate daily ritual that focused heavily on cleansing, detangling, and protecting the hair without the use of running water or synthetic chemical shampoos. The popular historical consensus suggests that people in the Middle Ages walked around with matted, greasy nests of hair that were completely neglected from birth to death. In reality, both medieval men and women took immense pride in their hair, viewing a clean, well-groomed head of hair as a reflection of physical health and moral purity. You pick up the horn comb, feeling its smooth, cool weight in your palm, because washing long hair with harsh lye soap could strip the natural oils and leave it dangerously brittle. The primary method of daily cleansing was dry brushing and meticulous combing. You would sit by a window for half an hour, running a fine-toothed comb through your hair from root to tip. This mechanical action physically scraped away the dust, soot from open hearths, and excess oils, transferring them directly onto the non-porous horn surface, which was then wiped clean with a linen rag. You uncork the small glass vial, pouring a single, glistening drop of the herbal oil onto your fingertips. It feels incredibly rich and silky, releasing a deep, woody aroma that instantly cuts through the lingering smell of wood smoke from the tavern kitchen. This oil was rubbed gently into the scalp and down the lengths of the hair to keep it supple, shiny, and naturally water-resistant. For women, who often grew their hair down to their ankles, this oiled hair was then intricately braided with silk ribbons and coiled neatly beneath linen veils or wimples, protecting it from the grime of the outside world for weeks at a time. Historians still debate the exact popularity of various medieval hair dyes, though manuscripts from the 12th century contain highly detailed recipes using boiled walnut shells to achieve deep brunettes, or saffron and rye flour to enhance a brilliant flaxen blonde. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval hair hygiene is that people frequently used a dry shampoo powder made from finely ground dried iris roots, also known as orris root. This fragrant, pale violet powder was dusted liberally throughout the roots of the hair, allowed to sit for a few minutes to absorb excess sebum, and then vigorously combed out, leaving the hair looking entirely refreshed and smelling faintly of sweet, fresh violets. You watch as a young attendant in the room demonstrates this technique, using a soft hog bristle brush to sweep the violet powder away, creating a tiny, fragrant cloud that catches the amber sunbeams. The slow, repetitive motion of the comb passing through hair, accompanied by the faint, rhythmic hiss of the bristles against the strands, is deeply hypnotic. It is a quiet, meditative form of grooming that forces you to slow down and focus on a single, comforting sensation. The room grows increasingly peaceful as the shadows longen across the oak floorboards. The soothing scents of rosemary, cedar, and violet root hang heavy in the air, wrapping around you like a warm, familiar blanket. You let your head rest back against the carved wooden frame of your chair, your eyes tracking the slow movement of the dust motes in the warm light, feeling your mind grow wonderfully quiet and still under the gentle spell of this ancient evening routine. You walk out of the quiet, violet-scented room and pass through a series of towering stone arches, entering the sprawling, high-ceilinged chamber of a grand royal palace. The air here is noticeably cooler, but it carries a fascinatingly dense layer of aromas. The sweet, resinous scent of burning frankincense from a nearby silver censer, the sharp tang of expensive French wine, and the rich, waxy perfume of dozens of pure beeswax candles. This is the realm of royal sanitation, where the highest nobility of the medieval world spared no expense to separate themselves from the ordinary grime of the lower classes, transforming basic physical hygiene into an ostentatious display of wealth and absolute power. The popular historical consensus is that medieval kings and queens lived in absolute filth, ignoring their bodies while their drafty stone castles slowly filled with rotting rushes and foul waste. In reality, royal court records from the 14th century show that monarchs like King Edward III of England possessed highly elaborate private plumbing systems that would have staggered the imagination of an ordinary peasant. You look into a small, curtained alcove off the main bedchamber, where a massive oak tub is lined with yards of thick, snowy white linen sheets to protect the royal skin from any hidden wooden splinters. Remember the portable fabric-lined bathtubs from the first section? Here, the system is permanently installed, featuring a pair of lead pipes that run directly through the thick stone walls to a dedicated furnace house downstairs, allowing servants to pump hot and cold running water straight into the king's bath at the turn of a bronze tap. You step closer to a polished mahogany chest where the royal grooming utensils are laid out on a velvet cloth. There are silver tongue scrapers, delicate ear scoops made of solid gold, and small crystal jars filled with a pale, creamy paste. This paste is an elite medieval skin cream, crafted from white wax, almond oil, and distilled rose water, designed to soothe the skin after a long day of riding in heavy iron armor. While a peasant made do with simple wood ash soap, the royal accounts show regular purchases of expensive Savon de Janes, a luxurious, smooth olive oil soap imported all the way from Genoa, Italy, which produced a rich, creamy lather that left the skin smelling of Mediterranean citrus. Historians still debate the exact frequency of these royal bathing rituals, with some chronicle writers claiming certain kings took a hot bath every single day for pleasure, while others suggest it was primarily a weekly or bi-weekly event used to entertain foreign ambassadors. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about royal sanitation involves a specialized court position known as the groom of the stool. This highly coveted aristocratic office required a nobleman of high birth to manage the king's private latrine, ensuring it was stocked with fresh linen cloths, bowls of scented water, and bundles of soft herbs. Because this official spent hours alone with the king during his most private moments, the groom of the stool often became one of the most politically powerful and trusted advisors in the entire kingdom, proving that medieval plumbing could literally shape the destiny of empires. You watch as a young page replaces the burning herbs in the silver censer, the thick white smoke billowing lazily toward the vaulted stone ceiling, where painted golden stars shimmer in the candlelight. The sheer luxury of the space is remarkably calming. The deep, muffled echoes of footsteps on heavy wool rugs, the rhythmic crackling warmth of the massive stone fireplace, and the steady, comforting aroma of frankincense and beeswax. The heavy velvet curtains around the royal bedchamber sway gently in the evening draught, casting long, slow shadows across the stone floor. The world of politics and royal decrees begins to fade into the background, replaced by the heavy, luxurious stillness of a palace locking its doors for the night. You take a slow, deep breath, letting the opulent quiet of the chamber settle over your mind, your eyelids growing heavier with every flicker of the distant candles as you prepare to descend from the royal apartments back into the quiet rhythm of the medieval night. You step out of the grand, high-ceilinged palace gates and descend a set of wide stone steps, finding yourself once again on the winding streets of a major medieval city as the late afternoon light turns a deep, burning amber. The air out here is vastly different from the frankincense-perfumed halls of royalty. It is a complex, earthy atmosphere filled with the scent of damp earth, leather tanneries, and the rich, wood smoke smell of dozens of hearth fires preparing evening meals. This is the reality of street cleanliness and municipal waste management, a subject that modern imaginations usually picture as a completely lawless, muddy nightmare of filth flowing unchecked down open gutters. The popular historical consensus among modern city dwellers is that medieval towns completely lacked any sense of civic order, with residents constantly throwing buckets of waste out of upper-story windows while shouting a warning to unfortunate pedestrians below. In reality, you notice that the street you are walking on is slightly crowned, meaning it is built higher in the center and slopes downward to stone-lined gutters on either side. This clever civil engineering allowed the frequent rain showers to naturally flush the streets clean, directing water toward large public drainage ditches. Furthermore, urban medieval communities were fiercely protective of their neighborhoods, establishing strict laws and deploying a network of public officials known as scavengers, or burlaw men, whose entire job was to find citizens who failed to sweep the pavement directly in front of their doorways every single Saturday afternoon. You stop by a small stone bridge crossing a narrow public canal, leaning your arms against the cool, rough stonework to watch the dark water ripple past. Remember the lye soap made from wood ash we encountered in the laundry courtyard? The residual water from thousands of domestic washing tasks naturally drained into these public channels, carrying its alkaline properties with it and creating an environment that helped mitigate the growth of foul algae along the stone walls. While the system was undeniably primitive compared to modern underground sewers, it was a highly organized effort to maintain a livable urban environment based on the technology of the time. Historians still debate the exact cleanliness of medieval drinking water sources, as documents show a constant, simmering conflict between industrial workers, like leather tanners and butchers, and ordinary citizens over who had the right to use certain public streams. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval street maintenance reveals that many large European cities employed full-time professional night crews known as muckmenders. These workers were paid exceptionally high wages to enter the city streets in the dead of night, long after the markets had closed and the citizens were fast asleep, to collect all the horse manure and organic waste generated during the day. They would load this material onto heavy wooden carts and haul it outside the city gates, selling it directly to local farmers as highly valuable, nutrient-rich fertilizer for the surrounding agricultural fields. You watch as a shopkeeper down the street finishes packing away his wooden crates of dried apples, taking a long broom made of tightly bound birch twigs to sweep the stray straw and dust from his storefront into the central gutter. The rhythmic, scraping sound of the twigs against the cobblestones creates a steady, comforting pulse that echoes softly off the closed timber walls. It is a peaceful, domestic ritual that signals the closing of the working day, a collective sigh of relief from an entire community preparing to retreat indoors. The amber light begins to fade into a dusky twilight violet, and the bustling energy of the market streets gives way to a quiet, serene stillness. The stone bridge beneath your hands feels cold and solid, a reassuring anchor in a world that is slowly dimming its lights. You let your breathing match the slow, unhurried rhythm of the turning tide in the canal below, your mind drifting away from the worries of the day as the gentle, dark shadows of the medieval night begin to stretch across the peaceful town. You slip away from the darkening, quiet cobblestone streets and step through the low doorway of a cozy medieval inn, leaving the cool twilight behind for the thick, comforting warmth of a communal sleeping room. The air here is a heavy blend of dried grass, cured leather, and the soft, sweet smell of beeswax candles burning down to their brass trays. You look across the room toward a low wooden frame heaped high with an immense, bulky mattress stuffed tight with fresh autumn straw and dried ferns. This is your bed for the night, a sleeping arrangement that was deeply communal, sensory, and required a unique set of daily defensive rituals to ensure a peaceful night of rest. The popular historical consensus is that medieval beds were horrific, rotting piles of filth where people slept directly on the floor alongside swarms of disease-carrying insects. In reality, you run your hand over the top of the bed and find a pair of beautifully woven heavy wool blankets resting over coarse but clean linen sheets. Because a proper feather mattress was an incredibly expensive luxury reserved for the high nobility, the average traveler or peasant relied on these straw-stuffed tickings. To prevent the straw from becoming damp and attracting unwanted pests, the entire contents of the mattress were emptied, burned, and replaced with fresh, sun-dried stalks several times a year, turning a simple bed into a fragrant, crisp nest that smelled of a summer harvest. You sit down on the edge of the mattress, the straw beneath you letting out a loud, satisfying crunch that sounds like walking through dry winter leaves. Remember the herbal hair oils and violet root powders from the vanity table? Those same aromatic plants served a dual purpose in the bedroom. Before the linen sheets were laid down, the mattress frame was thoroughly rubbed with crushed wormwood, dried lavender flowers, and wild fleabane. These plants contained natural essential oils that acted as highly effective, primitive insect repellents, driving away fleas and bedbugs before they could disturb your slumber. Historians still debate the exact psychological comfort of the medieval first sleep and second sleep, a widespread pattern where people would wake up for an hour at midnight to read, pray, or chat before falling into a second deep rest. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval sleeping hygiene reveals that people often slept completely naked, but they absolutely refused to take off their linen nightcaps. They believed that while the body could naturally regulate its temperature under heavy wool blankets, the cool, circulating night air entering an uncovered head could cause an imbalance in the delicate brain fluids, leading to vivid nightmares or a sudden morning fever. You watch the innkeeper's daughter pass through the room with a small iron warming pan filled with hot coals from the hearth, sliding it quickly between the linen sheets to chase away the deep, damp chill of the room. The rhythmic, sliding sound of the metal pan against the fabric, combined with the gentle crackle of the straw as it settles under your weight, creates a deeply comforting, hypnotic lull. It is a slow, methodical preparation for rest that makes the modern world of glowing phone screens and noisy electric heaters feel completely alien. The candle on the small bedside stool flickers one last time before sinking into the melted wax, plunging the corners of the room into soft, velvet shadows. The heavy wool blankets press down on your chest with a reassuring, protective weight, sealing out the cool drafts of the old inn. You let your head sink back into the soft linen pillow, your breathing slowing to match the rhythmic, gentle rustle of the straw beneath you, perfectly insulated from the outside world as you prepare to drift deeper into the quiet dark. You emerge from the warm, rustic cocoon of the straw mattress as the early dawn light begins to trace the edges of the room in cool shades of slate gray. Instead of heading out to a modern vanity, you walk over to a carved cedar chest sitting in the corner, where a collection of delicate perforated metal balls and tiny stitched linen pouches are arranged on a clean square of flax fabric. This is the world of medieval perfumes and odor masking, an art form that was deeply personal, highly strategic, and relied entirely on the natural alchemy of the earth to create a pleasant personal aura. The popular historical consensus is that people in the Middle Ages simply walked around smelling like rotting garbage and sour sweat, completely indifferent to the olfactory assaults they inflicted on one another. In reality, you pick up a small spherical object made of intricately filigreed silver. This is a pomander, an absolute staple of the medieval wardrobe for anyone who could afford a few spare coins. Inside this metal sphere rests a tightly packed, waxy ball made of crushed cloves, ground nutmeg, cinnamon bark, and a binding agent of rosewater and gum arabic. As you hold it in your hand, the ambient warmth of your skin gently activates the spices, releasing a rich, sweet, and comforting scent that cuts through the cool morning air like a fresh bakery. You slip the silver pomander onto a long leather cord, wrapping it around your waist so it hangs gently against your wool tunic, swaying rhythmically with every step you take. Remember the fresh linen smocks from the laundry courtyard that were dried over rosemary bushes? To enhance that clean foundation, medieval people didn't spray synthetic, alcohol-based perfumes onto their skin. Instead, they focused entirely on infusing their clothing and their immediate personal space. You open a small velvet pouch and find a handful of dried lavender flowers and sweet woodruff leaves, which you crumble between your palms before rubbing the fragrant oils directly along the seams of your sleeves and collar. Historians still debate the exact social boundaries of these aromatic practices, as some conservative church writers famously argued that excessive use of expensive imported perfumes was a sign of vanity and spiritual corruption, urging good citizens to content themselves with the simple, honest smell of clean well water. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval scent management reveals that people frequently carried tiny finger rings that featured miniature, hollow bezels designed to hold a single grain of rare ambergris or musk. When navigating a particularly crowded or poorly ventilated space, like a packed courtroom or a narrow alleyway near the tanneries, a medieval noble could simply raise their hand to their nose, inhaling a concentrated burst of sweet fragrance to shield their senses from the outside world. You watch as a servant scatters a fresh layer of green rushes mixed with dried chamomile across the tavern floorboards, the stems letting out a sharp, crisp, apple-like aroma as they are crushed underfoot. The combination of the sweet pomander at your waist, the fresh herbs on the floor, and the faint, lingering scent of lavender on your sleeves creates an extraordinarily layered and comforting sensory experience. The slow, rhythmic rustle of the rushes being swept into place becomes a steady, hypnotic background soundtrack to your morning preparations. The sun finally breaks over the horizon, casting warm, golden light across the polished silver of your pomander and reflecting tiny, glittering points of light onto the stone wall. The world outside is waking up, but within this fragrant room, everything feels balanced, orderly, and incredibly serene. You take a slow, deep, luxurious breath of the spice-laden air, feeling a profound sense of physical comfort and mental clarity wash over you as the gentle rhythm of the medieval morning carries you forward. You walk out of the fragrant, herb-strewn tavern room and enter a quiet, wood-paneled study where the morning light filters through a high, arched window, casting a warm glow over massive, leather-bound medical volumes. Sitting on a sturdy oak table is an intricate brass astrolabe, a small vial of clear rosewater, and a beautifully hand-painted chart displaying the 4 human complexions. This is the office of a medieval physician, a space where the rules of personal hygiene are governed not by modern germ theory, but by the complex, centuries-old balance of the 4 bodily humors. The popular historical consensus among modern minds is that medieval doctors were completely clueless barbarians who believed all sickness was a random curse from the stars, offering no logical advice on how to keep the body clean and healthy. In truth, you watch as the physician meticulously notes down a daily health regimen for a patient, relying heavily on the teachings of ancient masters like Galen and Avicenna. To a medieval medical mind, hygiene was the absolute foundation of preventative medicine, and it revolved around managing the 6 non-naturals, including diet, exercise, sleep, and the cleanliness of the air you breathe. You look at the chart on the wall, which explains that a healthy body requires a perfect equilibrium between blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. You run your fingers along the smooth, cool edge of a brass basin sitting on the table, designed for a delicate morning face wash. Remember the hot, steaming public bathhouses from the second section? This is where the medieval medical theories on hygiene take a fascinatingly cautious turn. While physicians universally agreed that washing away surface sweat and dirt with cool water was essential for decency, they genuinely feared the effects of excessive, boiling hot, full-body submersions. They believed that intense heat and steam artificially forced open the pores of the skin, which they viewed as tiny, defensive gates guarding the internal organs. Once these gates were flung wide open by hot water, the body became dangerously vulnerable to invisible, floating pockets of corrupted air, or miasmas, which could slip inside and cause the humors to violently boil and spoil. Historians still debate the exact social impact of these medical warnings, as court records indicate that many people happily ignored their doctors and continued soaking in hot tubs purely for pleasure throughout the 14th century. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval medical hygiene reveals that doctors frequently prescribed a practice called dry sweating as a completely safe alternative to water bathing. Instead of immersing yourself in a tub, you would sit inside a specialized, enclosed wooden box filled with the dry, aromatic smoke of burning juniper berries and cedar shavings. This process was believed to gently coax toxins out of the skin through a light sweat, while completely bypassing the perceived dangers of water, leaving your skin feeling tight, dry, and smelling distinctly of a crisp winter forest. You watch the physician pick up a small crystal dropper, carefully adding 2 drops of distilled vinegar and lavender water into a shallow silver bowl of fresh well water. He uses this mixture to gently cleanse his own hands before examining a patient, a ritual that was believed to purify the skin of any lingering foul vapors from the street. The slow, rhythmic ticking of a sand glass on the desk, combined with the scratching of the doctor's quill against thick parchment, creates an incredibly soothing, meditative atmosphere. It is a world where health is viewed as a delicate, beautiful dance with nature, requiring constant, mindful adjustments to maintain internal peace. The shadows move slowly across the rich leather covers of the medical texts, and the quiet of the study feels completely unbroken by the chaos of the modern world. You let your thoughts rest on this ancient philosophy of balance, feeling a wave of deep relaxation wash over your mind as you realize that their pursuit of cleanliness was, at its core, a search for total harmony. You take a slow, deep breath of the wood-scented air, letting your eyelids grow heavy as the peaceful academic silence of the room cradles your thoughts in an undisturbed, ancient quiet. Noidung de Guttenwin 100%. You step out from the physician's quiet, leather-scented study and cross the heavy oak threshold, finding yourself suddenly under the vast, open canopy of a late afternoon sky. The narrow, shadow-draped alleys of the medieval city drop away behind you as you join a long, winding dirt road that cuts straight through rolling hills of emerald green rye and fields of wild mustard flowers. You are now a medieval traveler, embarking on a long journey on foot across the countryside, carrying your entire world in a sturdy canvas pack slung across your shoulders. The air out here is breathtakingly clean, tasting sharply of damp pine needles, sweet clover, and the cool, earthy scent of a distant summer thunderstorm building on the horizon. Maintaining your personal cleanliness on the road requires a distinct set of simple, portable habits that rely completely on the natural landscape around you. The popular historical consensus among modern day trippers is that medieval travelers were forced to transform into absolute savages the moment they left a town, walking for weeks on end, wrapped in layers of mud, sweat, and rotting wool, without a single thought for their hygiene. In truth, you watch your fellow pilgrims and merchants pull up to a small, bubbling natural spring that pushes its way out from a crack in a mossy limestone cliff alongside the road. They immediately drop their heavy wooden walking staffs and unbuckle their leather shoes, wading their tired, dust-caked feet directly into the freezing, crystal-clear water with a collective sigh of pure relief. Even on the roughest wilderness trails, a medieval traveler carried a small, dedicated traveling pouch at their belt containing a coarse linen towel, a small cake of wood ash soap wrapped in beeswax paper, and a polished horn comb to tidy their hair before entering a new village. You kneel down by the edge of the stream, scooping the icy water into your palms to splash against your face. The sudden, shocking cold instantly washing away the midday fatigue and leaving your skin flushing with a warm, healthy glow. Remember the linen cloths we used back in the tavern to scrub our teeth with charcoal powder? When traveling light, your linen undershirt, or camise, becomes your primary defensive weapon against dirt and sweat. Every morning before the sun rises, you take a damp cloth and vigorously rub down your armpits, chest, and neck, relying on the friction of the coarse flax fibers to manually scrape away the oils and dust of the road. It is a deeply grounding, sensory ritual that connects you directly to the raw elements of the earth. Historians still debate the exact accessibility of clean water along major medieval pilgrimage routes like the Camino de Santiago, as old travel guidebooks from the 12th century frequently warned travelers about certain rivers whose water was toxic enough to kill a horse within minutes due to upstream runoff. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval travel hygiene reveals that many monastic orders deliberately built small, unmanned foot-washing stations at strategic crossroads in the deep wilderness. These stations consisted of a large, carved stone basin fed continuously by a hollowed-out log pipeline connecting to a clean mountain spring. Next to the basin, the monks would leave a fresh bucket of wood ashes and a stack of clean, rough cloths, allowing a completely solitary traveler to sanitize their feet and mend their blisters in peaceful isolation without ever meeting a single soul. You watch as an elderly merchant sitting on a smooth river stone takes out a small wooden vial of mint oil, rubbing a single drop into his palms before smoothing it over his beard to mask the smell of horse leather from his pack mules. The rhythmic, soothing sound of the spring water splashing over the smooth gray pebbles below, combined with the gentle rustle of the wind passing through the high canopy of the oak trees, creates a deeply hypnotic, comforting atmosphere. There is no rush to reach a modern hotel or check into a digital itinerary. The journey moves at the slow, deliberate pace of human footsteps, allowing your mind to unspool and relax into the ancient rhythm of the earth. The sun begins to slide beneath the distant line of blue hills, painting the sky in soft shades of dusty rose and lavender. The air turns cool and crisp, urging you to wrap your heavy wool cloak tightly around your shoulders as you prepare to make camp under the shelter of a wide, welcoming hawthorn hedge. Your body feels pleasantly tired, relaxed by the miles of walking and the refreshing chill of the spring water. You let your head rest against your canvas pack, watching the first evening stars blink into existence through the branches, your mind drifting away into a peaceful, undisturbed sleep cradled by the quiet gravity of the wilderness. Noidung de Gungwin 100%. You slip your heavy wool cloak from your shoulders and step into the warm, secure interior of a weaver's cottage, where the steady, rhythmic clack-clack of a wooden footloom fills the space with a comforting domestic melody. The air in here is wonderfully clean and dry, smelling faintly of raw flax fibers, warm lanolin oil from sheep's wool, and the sweet, starchy scent of ironed fabric. You look toward a large wicker basket sitting by the hearth, piled high with beautifully folded, snowy white garments made of fine linen. This is your undergarment collection, the absolute cornerstone of medieval hygiene, serving as a silent, invisible shield that protected both the human body and expensive outer clothing from the elements of daily life. The popular historical consensus among modern costume designers is that medieval people wore rough, scratchy wool directly against their bare skin, enduring constant itching and sweating as a normal part of existence. In reality, you pick up a freshly washed linen smock, or chemise as it is known, feeling the surprisingly smooth, cool, and supple texture of the flax fabric against your fingers. In the Middle Ages, your outer layers of dyed wool, velvet, or silk were almost never washed because moisture would ruin the expensive dyes and cause the heavy wool to shrink into a useless knot. Therefore, the linen undergarment was invented to do all the heavy lifting. It sat directly against the skin, acting as a highly absorbent sponge that soaked up the body's natural oils, sweat, and dead skin cells throughout the day. You run your hand along the neat, hand-stitched seams of the linen sleeve. Remember the lye soap and white ash wash vats from the laundry courtyard? Because linen is incredibly tough and actually becomes softer and stronger the more it is boiled. These undergarments could be subjected to the harshest, hottest wash routines week after week without falling apart. A person's cleanliness in the medieval world was not judged by how often they jumped into a bathtub, but rather by the brilliant whiteness of their linen collar and cuffs peeking out from beneath their wool tunics. To display a crisp, snowy line of linen at your wrist was the ultimate sign of a respectable, well-ordered person who cared deeply about their personal presentation. Historians still debate the exact number of undergarments owned by the average peasant household, with some economic records suggesting a laborer might only own 2 linen shirts, one to wear while the other was being boiled in lye, while wealthy merchants boasted chests filled with dozens of pairs. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval undergarment trends reveals that people frequently used their linen shirts as a form of portable climate control. In the freezing depths of winter, a traveler would layer 3 or 4 damp linen smocks over one another before putting on their wool coat. As the body heat naturally dried the trapped moisture within the tightly woven layers of linen, it created a highly insulated, warm pocket of air that kept the core temperature perfectly stable during long journeys through the snow. You watch as the weaver's apprentice takes a smooth, heavy heated stone from the edge of the hearth and slides it expertly across the damp collar of a linen shirt, creating a tiny rhythmic hiss as a cloud of sweet-smelling steam rises into the room. The repetitive, soothing movement of the stone, smoothing out the wrinkles, combined with the gentle warmth radiating from the fireplace, creates a deeply peaceful, hypnotic atmosphere. It is a slow, rhythmic craft that values endurance and care, making the frantic pace of modern fast fashion feel entirely unnecessary. The evening sun casts long, golden bars of light through the small window, illuminating the fine white threads of the linen resting in the basket. The room grows increasingly quiet as the weaver steps away from the loom, leaving only the soft, ambient crackle of the dying embers to break the silence. You let your body sink into a low wooden stool, surrounded by the comforting, clean smell of fresh textiles and warm hearth smoke. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling your eyelids grow heavy as the peaceful, industrious quiet of the cottage wraps around your mind like a soft linen sheet, guiding your thoughts into a state of deep, undisturbed relaxation. Noidung de Gitngwin 100%. You leave the cozy, textile-scented warmth of the weaver's cottage behind and follow a quiet, winding stone path that leads you up into the serene isolation of a high mountain valley. Before you stands the imposing timber and stone gates of a grand medieval monastery, its high walls cutting a clean silhouette against the darkening twilight sky. As you cross the threshold into the inner courtyard, the chaotic noise of the secular world completely evaporates, replaced by an enveloping, sacred hush that is broken only by the gentle, rhythmic trickling of a central stone fountain. The air here is breathtakingly pure, filled with the deep, green aroma of wild pine needles, damp moss, and the sharp medicinal scent of crushed thyme and rosemary wafting from the monastic infirmary garden. This is a sanctuary of monastery hygiene, a place where cleanliness was not merely a physical preference, but a deeply organized spiritual discipline that operated centuries ahead of its time. The popular historical consensus among modern tourists visiting these old ruins is that medieval monks lived in dark, stagnant squalor, completely ignoring their physical bodies to focus entirely on their prayers and spiritual texts. In reality, you look across the beautifully manicured courtyard and notice a highly sophisticated engineered system of open stone aqueducts and hollowed-out oak logs running seamlessly along the walls. The monks were the premier hydraulic engineers of the Middle Ages, deliberately constructing their complexes over fast-flowing mountain streams to create a continuous gravity-fed running water system. This fresh water was piped directly into the scriptorium, the kitchens, and a specialized communal washing room known as the lavatorium. You step inside this long, arched stone hallway where a massive circular bronze basin sits in the center, fed by dozens of tiny brass spouts that pour out a steady, musical stream of cool mountain water. Here, before every single meal and before entering the church for prayers, the monks would stand in silent rows, washing their hands and faces with meticulous care, using small pieces of hard linen cloth and a specialized soap crafted by the monastery's herbalist from rendered tallow and distilled lavender water. Cleanliness was intrinsically tied to the monastic rule of Saint Benedict, which dictated that physical purity was an essential reflection of a pure, uncorrupted soul preparing to meet the divine. Historians still debate the exact psychological impact of the monastic bathing schedule, as the strict rules generally permitted full-body hot baths only twice or 3 times a year, usually right before Christmas and Easter, viewing excessive indulgence in warm water as a potential distraction from spiritual asceticism. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval monastery hygiene reveals that the monks possessed a highly advanced automated waste management system built directly into their latrines, known as the Dorter. This long stone building was constructed directly over the swiftest, deepest part of the diverted mountain stream, creating a primitive but highly effective flush toilet system where the continuous, rushing current instantly swept away all domestic waste from the complex, keeping the air inside the dormitories remarkably fresh and entirely free from the foul odors that plagued contemporary medieval cities. You watch as a solitary monk in a heavy brown wool habit walks slowly along the stone cloister, his leather sandals making a soft, rhythmic slap-slap sound against the smooth pavement as he carries a single flickering beeswax candle to light the evening vespers. The combination of the rhythmic, splashing water from the bronze spouts, the deep scent of wild herbs in the cool night air, and the distant, low-humming chant of the monks gathering in the chapel creates a profoundly hypnotic, comforting atmosphere. There is an absolute, unshakable sense of order and safety within these thick stone walls, a timeless rhythm that completely insulates your mind from the anxieties of life. The last remnants of twilight fade into a deep, velvety indigo, and the stars begin to cluster thickly above the open courtyard. The stone walls of the monastery feel immensely solid and protective, shielding you from the wild, dark wilderness outside. You lean your head back against a smooth stone pillar, letting the steady, soothing music of the running aqueducts lull your thoughts into a state of perfect, undisturbed stillness, fully surrender to the peaceful, sacred quiet of the monastic night. You step away from the sacred, water-chiseled silence of the stone cloister and enter a brightly lit, elegant solar inside a nobleman's manor house, where the evening breeze carries a fascinatingly complex array of aromas. The air in here is a dense, luxurious blend of sweet almond oil, distilled lily water, and the faint, bitter scent of crushed iron ore. This is the private dressing room of a high-born medieval lady, a space where the pursuit of beauty and skin preservation required an intimate knowledge of botany, alchemy, and a willingness to apply the strangest ingredients nature could provide. The popular historical consensus among modern beauty gurus is that medieval women were completely forbidden from using cosmetics, living their lives with plain, unadorned faces due to strict church decrees that viewed makeup as a sinful attempt to alter God's handiwork. In reality, while conservative preachers certainly thundered from their pulpits against the vanity of painted faces, medieval court poetry and domestic handbooks reveal that wealthy women possessed highly elaborate multi-step cosmetic routines. You look down at a polished silver vanity tray where tiny ceramic pots are neatly arranged. The ultimate aesthetic goal for a medieval noblewoman was a flawless, pale complexion, which symbolized a life of leisure protected from the harsh sun that darkened the skin of hardworking peasants. To achieve this, she would apply a face wash crafted from distilled white wine, crushed pearls, and the juice of wild lilies, designed to gently bleach the skin and smooth out any imperfections. You pick up a small carved bone spatula and dip it into a tiny pot containing a vibrant crimson paste. Remember the herbal hair oils and violet root powders we encountered in the earlier sections? This blush paste relies on a similar natural alchemy, utilizing the crushed roots of the alkanet plant mixed with smooth sheep suet to create a subtle, healthy flush for the cheeks and lips. While a peasant woman might simply rub a ripe strawberry against her skin for a temporary stain, the nobility imported rare ingredients from distant lands to ensure their cosmetics lasted through long evening feasts and dances. Historians still debate the exact toxicity of some medieval cosmetic recipes, as certain late 14th century manuscripts actually recommended a mixture of white lead and vinegar, known as ceruse, to achieve an ultra-pale look, a dangerous formula that would later devastate the skin of the Elizabethans, but was used far more sparingly by medieval women. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about medieval skin hygiene reveals that women frequently used an elite facial mask made from the dried, pulverized droppings of swallows mixed with fresh honey and goat's milk. This bizarre concoction was believed to be the ultimate remedy for removing stubborn freckles and blemishes, relying on the natural enzymes of the bird droppings to exfoliate the skin, leaving the face looking remarkably smooth, bright, and radically refreshed. You watch as a lady-in-waiting carefully warms a small jar of rose water over a single candle flame, using a soft piece of silk to gently wipe away the remnants of the day's powders from her mistress's face. The rhythmic, circular motions of the cloth, combined with the sweet, soothing release of the rose scent into the warm room, creates an incredibly calming, hypnotic atmosphere. It is a slow, intimate ritual of self-care that emphasizes patience, preservation, and a deep appreciation for the healing properties of the earth. The candles in the solar begin to burn low, casting a warm, amber glow over the tapestries hanging on the walls. The busy chatter of the court downstairs has completely faded, leaving only the soft, ambient sigh of the wind outside the shuttered windows to break the quiet. You let your body sink into a heavily cushioned bench, completely relaxed by the comforting scents of rose, almond, and beeswax. You take a slow, deep breath, letting your mind grow wonderfully heavy and still as the peaceful, gentle vanity of the medieval night wraps around your thoughts in an undisturbed, ancient quiet. You step away from the soft, amber-lit elegance of the lady's solar, leaving the lingering notes of rosewater and sweet almond behind, and find yourself walking along a quiet, elevated stone gallery. Through the high, unglazed windows, the vast medieval night stretches out before you, cool and clear, painted in deep shades of midnight indigo, and dotted with an infinite field of silver stars. Below, the city is completely dark, its fires bankered down to glowing coals and its citizens fast asleep. This is the moment of transition. The closing chapter of our journey, where the old medieval ways of viewing the body begin to subtly shift, preparing the world and your mind for a new era and a deep restorative slumber. The popular historical consensus among modern researchers is that the transition out of the Middle Ages brought an immediate, miraculous leap in cleanliness and medical understanding. In reality, change shifted like a slow, heavy tide. As you look out over the quiet rooftops, you are standing at the threshold of a new consciousness. The centuries of relying on the balance of the four humors, the fear of hot water opening the protective gates of the skin, and the reliance on fresh woodland herbs to mask the elements of life are slowly beginning to gather like morning mist waiting for the sun. Yet the profound wisdom of the medieval world, its deep structural connection to the natural rhythms of the earth, its unhurried patience, and its emphasis on protecting the body through the simple purity of boiled white linen remains an incredibly beautiful testament to human resilience. You run your hand along the smooth, cool stone of the gallery railing, feeling the solid, reassuring weight of the past beneath your fingers. Remember the wooden bathing tubs filled with chamomile from our very first section? Or the rhythmic clack of the weaver's loom, creating the protective shields of white flax. Every single ritual we have witnessed tonight was a deliberate, mindful act of comfort and care, a way for people to find sanctuary, order, and beauty within the chaotic elements of their daily lives. They did not rush through their routines under the harsh, buzzing glare of electric lights. They let the natural light of the sun and the gentle, flickering warmth of a tallow candle dictate when it was time to cleanse, when it was time to work, and when it was time to rest. Historians still debate the exact decades when the modern concept of hygiene truly began to solidify, with many pointing out that even as late as the 16th century, kings and peasants alike still preferred a vigorous rub-down with a dry linen cloth over a full immersion in water. However, an incredibly strange and lesser-known fact about this transitional period reveals that the very first modern public health ordinances regarding water purity were actually direct copies of ancient monastic blueprints. The sophisticated plumbing systems, aqueducts, and waste management channels designed by solitary monks in mountain valleys became the literal foundations upon which the great modern cities of the world would eventually build their sanitized subterranean infrastructure. The cool night wind gently catches the edges of your wool sleeves, carrying with it the faint, combined memories of our journey. The sharp cleanliness of wood ash lye, the soothing green of wild mint, the rich warmth of frankincense, and the sweet, comforting spice of a silver pomander. The world is turning. The old century is gently folding itself away into the pages of history books, leaving only a quiet, peaceful stillness to occupy the vast space between the past and the present. You feel an immense, enveloping sense of safety and calm wash over your entire body, realizing that the basic human desire for comfort, cleanliness, and rest is a timeless thread that connects you directly to every soul that has ever walked these ancient paths. The stars above seem to pulse in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, their silver light casting soft, long shadows across the stone gallery floor. The gentle, ambient hum of the night wind acts as a soothing lullaby, erasing the final, lingering thoughts of the modern day from your mind. Your muscles completely relax, releasing the very last remnants of tension into the cool, dark air. The journey is complete. The old world has safely tucked its children into bed beneath heavy wool blankets and clean linen sheets. And the quiet gravity of the earth is inviting you to do the exact same. You take one last, slow, luxurious breath of the cool, ancient night, letting your heavy eyelids finally close as your mind drifts away into a deep, beautiful, and utterly undisturbed sleep. Open quote, close quote, open quote, close quote, close quote.